um, trying to find some kind of common ground. There's some stuff that's going to be battleground issues. You're talking, immigrant rights and religious freedom for Muslims. Those are battleground issues, and we can't give an inch on that. Some common ground issues, whether you're talking about addiction and the opioid crisis, whether you're talking about opportunity zones, anti-poverty, whether you're talking about criminal justice, where I felt there was more room for us to work together than people were recognizing. I think that the grace that frankly had not been shown the past 4 years, we need to start showing right now. We know what it feels like to feel like the president's not on your side and to want the president to send you some signals. There's a danger that we might start saying, well, don't send any signals to those guys, they were mean to us. I don't want us to become what we're fighting. I don't want us to feed what we're fighting. I believe that Joe Biden is correct. If we reset this conversation, there is common ground. You got you got a bunch of older, white, heterosexual guys who are some of the best people in the country. They know a trade, they raised a family, they started a business. We need those guys to help rebuild this country. And they need to know that we respect them. They voted against us, that's fine. Vote against us again. But we need you. We need you to help us rebuild this country. You got kids in this country who need your example. If we start talking that way, I think we can get past some of these fears. And if we don't, we're going to be in another loop and another loop and another loop.
I'm just wondering, Gloria, when you see these pictures, what do you think?
I think it's remarkable. I think that, again, it's like the steam has gone out of the teapot and people are those people are relieved. I think the challenges are obvious. We've all been talking about the challenges. But one thing is that they believe that Joe Biden can change things, can change the way they feel and the way life is. And another thing I want to say, given all we've been talking about, will he be able to work with the Republicans? Will he be able to work with the liberals? The difference with Joe Biden is that when he tells you something, he is telling you the truth. And I know, Rick, that you know Biden. And he can talk a lot and get on people's nerves and all the rest, and you can talk about that. But he's a man who's devoted his life to public service, and he is a man who is known as somebody who told you the truth when he was dealing with you, and that matters.
Well, he calls himself a transitional president,
right.
and the question is, will it be a transition from an era of compromise and good faith compromise, or will it be a transition from that era to an era of zero-sum politics? I totally embrace what you said, Van, but what we have seen is a penchant to weaponize our differences rather than search for common ground. And the political rewards have been there in the parties for that. You can't in a democracy ever get 100% of what you want. And the question is, are you willing to take 80? Or are you not going to take 80? And are you going to make the differences, exploit the differences for your own political profit? Or are you going to come together? And we'll see. That's certainly Biden believes that in the first.
It's also so, we've just come through a campaign where on the Democratic side, you did not see large gatherings of people.
Right.
Obviously, during the protests this summer, there were large gatherings of people in the streets. But to see these crowds this morning, the diversity of the crowds, a lot of mask wearing, which is certainly a good thing. Obviously, not social distancing, and over the last several days, there hasn't been, because we've had this election, but it bears repeating. We are in the midst of
this country's been a pressure cooker for the last 4 years. Donald Trump has had his hand on that dial, and this is a sense of relief there.
Totally.
And the great thing about it is, it's coming out in joy. And I use that word joy over and over again because that's like a word in the movement. The young people. There's Adrienne Marie Brown is this young kind of Instagram star who's been talking about this politics of joy. And these artists have been going out. Remember all those long lines? They're bringing the pizza. They're also bringing music. They're bringing dance, all these memes and stuff. They've created a basis of a positive culture. And so I think that that's good. And again, so you got to look for the good, look for the positive, look for the hopeful. These are hopeful. They're not out there mad. They're not out there. They're out there celebrating democracy. Let's build with those people and people right now who are mourning. Let's make sure they know they've got to play. If you want, come out to the party. Come out to the party. This is about America.
Well-
it's not about versus Trump. It's about America. Come out to the party.
I'm sure Joe Biden loves seeing this, but it wouldn't surprise me if he also told everyone, you know what, celebrate apart rather than together right now because
The social distancing.
because of the pandemic. Because of the pandemic, I think that that has been his message, and these are people who clearly want to celebrate, and they are masked. I'm seeing, but who knows? They're close together. But there is a celebration going on. Change sometimes brings that out in you, and I think, look, if Donald Trump has won, his supporters will probably be celebrating too. I'm not, I'm not saying that this belongs to one side or another, but
there would be the same sense of relief of his supporters and the same sense of,
more trucks.
possibilities.
There'd be more trucks because they have the trucks and the caravan stuff like that. But look, I just think so many people work so hard. Again, this particular the way that the Biden campaign functioned really let a lot of people just kind of do their own thing. It wasn't a super top-down thing. You had Biden, there was a circle around him, moving him forward. But in a pandemic, you couldn't do it the normal way. So people just started creating their own stuff. There's a campaign called With Love that I was a part of. People just made their own ads.
Can I just make one point on this? Jen O'Malley Dillon, the manager of this campaign, came in after the primary, could not meet with her staff, could not meet with her candidate, had to organize in the midst of a pandemic, take a campaign that was underfunded and underorganized and turn it into a winning campaign, and did a remarkable job. First woman, I think, who's ever managed a winning presidential race. Did a remarkable job in transforming this campaign under the most difficult circumstances any manager has ever faced. And oh, that's right, Kellyanne Conway. My apologies. But, this task was just so prodigious, and it needs to be said, what she and the entire team did to take the campaign from where it was in the primary to where it is today, a winning campaign. And you can't, remarkable accomplishment.
And you can't forget too. In the primary, he was going down. As I said, he went from being a joke to a juggernaut. So you got to give some credit to Clyburn.
A lot of credit.
Stood up and Clyburn said, "Hey guys,
some credit."
Some credit.
Even Santorum's going to give credit.
All credit.
But I'm just saying.
I'm taking Jim out to lunch. Everybody sees Jim Clyburn.
But Jim Clyburn reached out and said, "Look, this is our guy. Let's get around this guy." But that meant that from the very beginning, the campaign was a little bit different than a normal winning primary campaign, and it brought that spirit of ordinary people in.
And they stayed on message. They didn't sort of, go after every bright, shiny object, go after every tweet. They just kind of stayed on their message. They talked about COVID. They talked about health care, even when it came to the Supreme Court and the Supreme Court nominee. They stuck to what they knew.
Message discipline from Joe Biden.
Cared about. Message discipline from Joe Biden. Think about that.
Yeah, we should also talk about, this is probably impolitic to say, but the fact is there are a lot of people who were nervous. I wrote about what the campaign needed to be doing during the pandemic, because if the president had seized the platform and led the country through this pandemic in a way that broadened his base, that could be a problem. But what really happened was Biden was relatively quiet for many months, and the president had the stage to himself. That turned out to be a plus for Biden.
Let's go back to Jake in D.C. Jake?
All right, Anderson, the congratulations are starting to come from not just prominent Democrats, but prominent Republicans. We heard from former Ohio Governor John Kasich, obviously, a few minutes ago on our air. Jeb Bush, the former governor of Florida and who ran for president and lost in the primaries to Donald Trump, writes, "Congratulations to President-elect Biden. I have prayed for our president most of my adult life. I will be praying for you and your success. Now is the time to heal deep wounds. Many are counting on you to lead the way." A lovely statement from Jeb Bush. It would be nice if we heard similar from current Republican office holders, not just former. But it is a nice thing to hear.
Yeah, I don't know if you caught this as you read it. The second line: "I've prayed for our president most of my adult life."
Well, I'm sure he prayed. I'm sure he prayed for
adult life.
I'm sure he prayed for Donald Trump as well. There was no love lost there.
Yeah, exactly. And listen. Obviously, the goal of this tweet was to lead by example and to show what class looks like. which is frankly how the Bushes have historically seen this. His father, George H.W. Bush, was the last one-term president. There is no love lost, but that is somebody who is trying to kind of, shout from the rooftops, please follow. I'm interested to see when and if his brother, the former president, does something similar.
Will.
Yeah, he will.
I'm curious about when.
Yeah, and I mean, I think a lot of Republicans, let's be honest, probably feel exactly the same way as Jeb Bush does. I don't agree with all of Joe Biden's policies, but, I think Bush is saying here in this tweet, I think you can do the job. And, and frankly, I'm okay with you doing the job. And I wouldn't be surprised if there were many sitting Republicans in the United States Senate who are looking at the situation and they're saying, the chances of us holding on to the Senate are pretty good. They like that. They like having control, the reins of the pace of the judiciary. They like having a brake valve for the Congress in general. And they're okay with a president who is less erratic, who has given them a lot of heartburn over the last 4 years, if you're being honest. President Trump has not made the life of some Republican senators in particularly easy. And a Joe Biden presidency, though they disagree, would be seen even, I think, in Congress as a relief for some people.
Not being chased after in the hallways about every tweet that the leader of their party
That they
puts
had
out
not
there
seen
is going to be a relief. Not to say that he's not going to be tweeting. He is going to be tweeting. He's just not going to be
They don't
tweeting
have
as
to
the
respond
president.
to it
As the
anymore.
president,
Yeah, they don't have to
exactly.
lie to reporters anymore and say they haven't seen the tweet. They can just oppose Joe Biden's policies or try to work with him. Let's go outside the White House. President Trump, as far as we know, is still golfing. But outside the White House, there is quite a crowd of celebrants. Vivian Salama is in the crowd covering this for us. Vivian, tell us what you're seeing.
Hey, Jake, that's right. Outside the White House, we're about 100 feet outside the north side of the White House right now. And within seconds of CNN and other news organizations calling the race for Biden, the crowd started flowing into this area of downtown D.C. Now, for folks who are not familiar with D.C., I want to sort of paint the picture. I'm standing at the corner of H Street and 16th Street in Northwest, which was renamed Black Lives Matters Plaza. And so right behind me, you see crowds now gathering all the way down Black Lives Matters Plaza, chanting and cheering for Joe Biden. And that celebration has continued as we've been here. Folks cheering when the race was called, when some news organizations called the state of Nevada for Biden, then the chant started again. You have groups of gay rights, LGBTQ protesters and demonstrators, activists who are out here celebrating their victories. Trans people have been out here celebrating. You have a lot of women with veils, Muslims, who are coming out here as a group to celebrate this victory for Joe Biden and what it means for them sort of in this transition. Some interesting chants as well. We heard the crowd a few moments ago chanting for Stacey Abrams, celebrating the role that she has played in Georgia to help get Democrats in the forefront of this race and potentially flip that state. And so this crowd is growing by the second. And you can see, it's hard for us to see where we're standing, but we can't even see the end of it. On Black Lives Matters Plaza, the crowd stretches all the way down, and they continue to go, Jake. So I think we're going to see a lot more celebrations in the hours ahead.
That's right. A lot of celebrations in a spot where not long ago protesters were being gassed so that President Trump could walk to the church there. Vivian, why don't you walk around the crowd there a little bit if you can? Let us see a little bit more.
We're going to try, Jake. Our signal is very fragile. We'll try to walk around and take you through. Our signal is very fragile right now, but we're going to try to walk around and hopefully we don't lose you. But here we go. If we can take a little walk here, you can see some of these signs around here. A lot of signs. You're fired. Echoing President Trump's signature from his popular reality show. Hopefully you can see me every single time a new group comes through.
All right.
Jake.
We're losing this. We're losing the signal. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Probably a lot of satellite action going on there right now.
A lot of people down there.
A lot of people down there. A lot of cell phones. I want to read some of the more some of the celebratory and congratulatory notes that are coming in. Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, and a close ally of President Trump, somebody kind of in the mold of President Trump. This is going to sting for President Trump. Sending a note saying congratulations to Joe Biden on his election as President of the United States and to Kamala Harris on her historic achievement. The U.S. is our most important ally, and I look forward to working closely together on our shared priorities from climate change to trade and security. That's going to leave a mark.
Yep.
And then former President Bill Clinton, less of a surprise. America has spoken, democracy has won. Now we have a president-elect and vice president-elect who will serve all of us and bring us all together. Congratulations to Joe Biden and Kamala Harris on your momentous victory.
And Jake, just in the last couple of days, our colleague Christina Alessi has been doing some reporting about what's going on in the business world and how they're looking at this period that could be actually quite unstable for the United States, in which you have a president-elect and a sitting president who may not concede. And they've made it very clear they're going to try to inch towards stability as much as possible, even to the point potentially of weighing in to say, respect the results of the election.
So there's a new statement from Barack Obama, the 44th president of the United States and the former boss of now President-elect Joe Biden, saying, I could not be prouder to congratulate our next president, Joe Biden, and our next First Lady, Jill Biden. I also couldn't be prouder to congratulate Kamala Harris and Doug Emhoff for Kamala's groundbreaking election as our next vice president. In this election, under circumstances never experienced, Americans turned out in numbers never seen. That's really such a good point. We're in the middle of a pandemic, and it was such a great turnout. And once every vote is counted, President-elect Biden and Vice President-elect Harris will have won a historic and decisive victory. We're fortunate that Joe's got what it takes to be president and already carries himself that way. Because when he walks into the White House in January, he'll face a series of extraordinary challenges no incoming president ever has: a raging pandemic, an unequal economy and justice system, a democracy at risk, and a climate in peril. I know he'll do the job with the best interests of every American at heart, whether or not he had their vote. So I encourage every American to give him a chance and lend him your support. The election results at every level show that the country remains deeply and bitterly divided. It will be up to not just Joe and Kamala, but each of us to do our part, to reach out beyond our comfort zone, to listen to others, to lower the temperature, and find some common ground from which to move forward. All of us remembering that we are one nation under God. Finally, I want to thank everyone who worked, organized, and volunteered for the Biden campaign, every American who got involved in their own way, and everybody who voted for the first time. Your efforts made a difference. Enjoy this moment, then stay engaged. I know it can be exhausting, but for this democracy to endure, it requires our active citizenship and sustained focus on the issues, not just in an election season, but all the days in between. Our democracy needs all of us more than ever, and Michelle and I look forward to supporting our next president and first lady however we can. A lovely and typical and characteristically expansive remarks from President Obama.
But that coming from a president who inherited the worst economic recession since the Great Depression says a lot.
Yeah.
And it's true. We've never had a pandemic like this in 100 years, and the economic fallout has been as significant. So he understands what that really is like, and it's worse now because I don't know that our country was as divided in 2008 as it is now politically.
It didn't feel it because we had just elected the nation's first black president.
Yeah.
It felt like the nation had come together in a lot of ways.
I felt it a couple years later in 2010 when everything changed. I just also want to take a moment to talk about the effort that President Obama put in to getting his vice president elected to the presidency. He did it 4 years ago for Hillary Clinton. In fact, he said, this is personal for me, to people in the crowds. And it didn't work. This time it did. A lot of reasons for that. But in terms of President Obama, starting with the Democratic convention, he broke all protocols because he thought that President Trump broke all norms in a very dangerous way. And when I say broke protocols, he was so aggressive against President Trump, and he continued that on the stump in recent weeks.
Yeah. I mean, imagine if George W. Bush in 2012 had gone out on the stump. He didn't, and that's normally what presidents do.
Precisely.
Is refrain. Barack Obama did not choose to do that.
Yeah, no, he didn't. And he had no choice. I mean, let's be honest. I mean, he was as much a part of this campaign as Joe Biden was, because Donald Trump's presidency began about Barack Obama and who he was, and Donald Trump's presidency was in large part about the invalidation of the Obama era. And so this was not just about electing Joe Biden, but about preserving or restoring some of the things that he did as president that had been lost in a Donald Trump presidency. But I do want to refer to one thing that he talked about in his statement, which is the turnout in this election. Not as a political statement, but just as a statement of fact that when you let Americans vote, when you give them ways to vote, they will vote, and they do vote. And Republicans for many years have taken the opposite stance, trying to make it more difficult for people to vote for a number of reasons. They say it's because of fraud. But I think when you really talk to them privately, they acknowledge it's because they're concerned that there are not enough people who support their views who show up at the polls, and that it is a political strategy about raw power. But I do think that if there's one thing Donald Trump proved in this election, you can turn out Republicans too, if you give them a chance to vote. And so it's time that we as a country just do this fair and square. Let as many people vote as we can, make it easier for people to vote, and they'll show up, even Republicans.
By the way, millions of people voted by mail for Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Millions of people voted by mail for Republicans. And as far as we can tell by the exit polls as they stand right now, Donald Trump appears to have increased the black support and Latino support for him from previous Republican presidential candidates. Dana?
Thanks, Jake. And I want to bring in the House Majority Whip, Congressman Jim Clyburn of South Carolina. Mr. Whip, you endorsed Joe Biden in the South Carolina primary. You gave him life in that process, and now he is the president-elect. Your reaction?
Well, I'm very pleased with the results. I'm very ecstatic about what may be the future of this great country of ours. My investment in Joe Biden had everything to do with the restoration of our pursuit towards a more perfect union. I know this is not a perfect country. My God, I'm here. I'm living testimony that the country is not perfect. But we cannot give up on the country. And I could not sit idly by and watch this country take backward steps in that pursuit of perfection. And so I am pleased that we can now get back on course. We need to restore voting rights to people. We need to restore people's lives and livelihoods. This campaign and a few other things before demonstrated that Alexis de Tocqueville's admonition that this country is great, not because it is more enlightened than any other nation, but rather because it has always been able to restore or to repair its faults. Some fault lines have opened up in education, in healthcare. Even the election 4 years ago opened up a fault line. And this was an opportunity for us to repair that. And so that's what I'm happy about.
You tweeted about Kamala Harris being the vice president-elect and first woman of color to do that, and about what this means for diversity. Can you talk about the emotions that you feel right now?
I'll tell you, I don't admit it, but that was when she was named to the ticket. I'm the father of 3 daughters, and I have 2 granddaughters. And to me, this breaks a glass ceiling for them and all other daughters and granddaughters in the world. So I was very, very moved by this. Now, Joe and I talked about it several times when he was trying to make his decision. He had agreed it would be a woman. And I don't mind saying now, I said to him in private that I thought that a lot of the results would turn on whether or not that woman be a black woman. I never said that publicly because I don't think you ought to diminish your candidate. And when you ever tell a candidate what he must do in publicly, that diminishes the standing with the public. So I gave all my advice to him in private, but I'm very pleased that it was a black woman selected. I think it cemented his relationship to the black community. And if I may, let me say this about these recent polls about about Donald Trump increasing his vote in the black community, especially black men. Now, I think I know how to gauge that stuff, not just with the barbershops. I have a way of living that keeps me in close contact with the black community. And let me tell you something. When you poll, these were exit polls. The exit polls will not give you what was going on this year, because more than 80% of African Americans in a lot of communities voted before Election Day.
Well,
if you get your information from the exit polls on Election Day, you do not have an accurate universe.
But Mr. Clyburn, just
so that dead wrong.
Okay, just so you know, and we can talk about this later, it's probably not the moment, but the exit polls done were not just Election Day. It was prior to Election Day when early voting started. But let's put that aside right now, because I want to follow up on something that you just said. You revealed for the first time that you urged now President-elect Joe Biden to pick a woman of color. I tried to get you to say that at the time, and many others did. You didn't bite. What was his reaction, aside from the obvious, which is that he acted on it? But in the immediate moments after you made that suggestion, what was his reaction?
Well, he listened. He did not respond to me publicly, and of course, or even privately. Of course, about 2 or 3 days before he made the announcement, he was still torn, and we concluded. I think he said to me, "My heart's in one direction, my head's in the other." I said, "Go somewhere in private and see can you bring both of them together."
Which one was his heart and which one was his head, do you think?
I'm never going to tell that one.
But you think you know the answer?
I do know the answer. Yeah, I know what he said to me.
Can you give us anything more about those conversations?
No,
Okay.
you can talk them to me.
Well,
I'm never.
Okay, let's look ahead. Well, first of all, let me just ask, have you spoken to President-elect Biden since the news today?
No, I've not spoken with him today. Quite frankly, I was going about my ordinary business. I was real nervous I was never nervous about Pennsylvania. But because of all the litigation, I wanted to see us do this with not having to need Pennsylvania. And I think we still may be there. But I was more nervous about Arizona than any other place. I don't know what the results have been.
You know how hard it's going to be because you've been in Congress for so long with either party, both parties in charge of either chamber. What is your best piece of advice for Joe Biden as he not only tries to reach across the aisle, but tries to navigate your caucus, where, as you know, based on the call that you had with House Democrats this week, there are a lot of progressives who want their voices heard, but a lot of people who represent moderate districts who want the leadership of the Democratic Party to listen to them as well.
Look, we've got a big tent, and we need to be respectful of each other. I understand all of us have got congressional districts that are different from the other congressional districts. I know a lot of people in the United States Congress that get elected overwhelmingly in their districts that cannot get elected in my district. And there are a lot of districts that I cannot get elected in. And that's what we have to keep in mind. That these congressional districts are different, and therefore people's pursuit of their political reactions and their the votes, they're all going to be different. And if you learn anything about being a member of Congress, be in charge of the vote counting and see what you have to do in order to reconcile people's backgrounds and experiences to get the votes. And so I'm so tired of all of this progressive versus moderate. Let me tell you something if you got time. My father was a very conservative guy. He used to drill in our heads that if you make $1, son, save a nickel. If you leave the room, turn the lights out, conserve energy. But he was a minister. I never heard him ask his congregations for a conservative offering. He always asked for a liberal offering. So I learned early that conservatism is good in some instances, liberalism is good in other instances. Let's see, can we reconcile those things? This whole notion that I got to be your way or the highway, you better stop that. Our party is not made up of that kind of people. You know, we got, 55 African Americans in our caucus, and over on the Republican side, they've got one, and he's now gone. I don't know if they elected another one. So we don't have the same makeup of the caucus. And we've got to stop all this foolishness of it's got to be my way, and we got to put this in the bill, or I'm not going to vote for it. Come on. That cannot be our future. If so, we're going to be back in the minority, and we're going to be stuck in that minority for a long time. Let's respect each other's backgrounds, each other's congressional districts, and give people enough room to represent their districts.
Mr. Clyburn, the House Majority Whip, again, the man who endorsed Joe Biden in the South Carolina Democratic primary at a time where he needed that endorsement and gave him political life and ultimately the nomination and the presidency. Thank you so much, and congratulations to you, sir.
Thank you. Well, thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Without
what do you think of that?
Without Majority Whip Clyburn, today would not be happening.
Exactly.
Period. I mean, maybe a different Democrat would have won the nomination and gone on to win, or who knows. But Clyburn is responsible for the Biden presidency.
And for the folks,
Period.
and for the folks at home, he's also the guy who counts the votes in the House of Representatives. So he knows what he's talking about, and he's someone who now has an. I mean, I shouldn't say now. He is a well-respected Democrat and has been for a very long time. But he's in a position where his word and his voice about how Joe Biden navigates the next 4 years as president, navigates the Democratic caucus and the relationship with Republicans is going to carry a lot of weight. And it really matters, I think, Dana, what he said to you at the very end, which is that he wants the party to recognize that it is a coalition party that is made out of liberals and more conservative Democrats. And we should be clear, Jim Clyburn is a congressman from South Carolina. He represents a lot of black voters who are, many of them, more politically conservative than people think. So it is a party that is going to be an amalgamation of a lot of different views. And Joe Biden, it's not going to be easy for him to navigate that, but he's going to have to both deal with his own party and what we were discussing earlier, reach out to Republicans and figure that all out.
But he was warning the progressives in the party kind of on behalf of Joe Biden to, not just go for everything, but understand that progress sometimes takes baby steps and sometimes takes compromise.
Yeah, look, and this is something that we haven't covered much this week because we've been more focused on who the president is going to be. But there is a lot of there's a civil war going on within the House Democratic Party right now. The House Democrats lost a lot of seats during this election, even though Joe Biden won. There are a lot of more moderate Democrats. There are a lot of more. Well, they lost 4 seats, but they thought they were going to pick up.
They were going to gain.
I should have said they lost a lot of races. They thought they were going to gain about 10 or 15 seats, and they ended up losing 4. A lot of moderate Democrats that were very disappointed. And one of the reasons they were disappointed, and we heard this in the conference call that House Democrats had that was leaking in real time and being reported on by our colleague Manu Raju and others, is there were people like the Congresswoman from Virginia and others from more moderate districts complaining that AOC and Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib and other members of the so-called squad and others progressives who have done a tremendous amount to bring enthusiasm and ideas to the Democratic Party, but that some of their ideas, especially defunding the police and that notion, hurt Democrats, hurt them in races where the Republicans were able to tie the Democrats to socialism, to the idea of defunding the police. And that was a little speech. He wasn't talking to you.
No, he was definitely
not
talking
to Congresswoman Ilhan Omar and AOC and Rashida Tlaib and others.
Which he said privately
Yes.
on that phone call this week. And the fact that he took the chance that we gave him to say it publicly, I thought was very, very telling.
But he's also been saying this for quite some
Sure,
time.
of
I
course.
remember this summer during the George Floyd protests, he was very clear. Defund the police is not a message that Democrats should adopt or that would work for many Democrats across the country. He was crystal clear about that. And this is a man who was himself involved in the civil rights movement back in the 1960s. So he's not just saying that because he's been looking from his ivory tower in Washington. I also think that when Joe Biden said yesterday, when he came out and spoke, that we have a mandate, we were talking about it in the context of a mandate to lead the entire country. But I also think that he has a mandate to lead the Democratic Party specifically in a particular direction. He had to navigate a lot of minefields in this general election, including this issue of defund the police, including some of these other tricky issues where he had to be somewhere between not alienating the left and not being seen as overly central or not alienating, the suburban part of the country that he was trying to win back. And he did that.
He achieved
and
it,
so that path that he carved out in the general election, they're going to have to figure out a way to turn that into a governing principle that can help him navigate these minefields that he'll face immediately.
He did a skillful job of threading the needle, of not alienating the progressives, whereas where the energy is in the party, and not alienating the suburbs of Philadelphia, where he needed the votes.
Yeah, and where he got
the votes. He did an able job of threading the needle. I will also say that if he had been running against a less ham-handed opponent, I mean, Donald Trump would go out there and say Cory Booker is going to invade your neighbor. I mean, like it wasn't. They weren't even dog whistles. It was bullhorn racist tropes, and like making Cory Booker, Senator Booker, the poster child of it. Cory Booker's not exactly Willie Horton.
But President Trump, President Trump got his people out.
Sure.
Okay.
Yep.
But he didn't win over the suburban ones.
He did not win over the
suburban.
But his theory of this election was that if Trump has his own people, and if he brings enough of them out, he can win. He got somewhat close, but obviously it was not enough. I do think that there is a choice facing Republicans now about what you're saying, which is, is that message a ham-handed message, or is it the best we've got?
Yeah.
I don't know that they fully settled on what the answer to that is.
I think if you give truth serum to Republican elected leaders, most of them, they will say it's not the best they've got. that it's maybe the opposite of the best they've got on that. One thing I want to say, just going back to the whole the comments that Mr. Clyburn just made about progressives and moderates, and how he doesn't like those terms, and everyone has to just figure out how to deal together. We know how hard that is going to be.
I don't like those terms.
we know how hard it's going to be.
Come on.
I mean, listen. I mean, you allow him to say what he wants. He does want to try to figure out a way to lead the entire party. But what I want to say is that I got a text earlier today, I believe it was, from a very progressive member of Congress who was reminding me, as we were talking about black voters and how black voters came out, but also progressive young voters, people of color in urban centers, that was when we dissect these votes after this election is over and we can have time to do that the increase in the voter share for Joe Biden, this member of Congress believes, is going to show that really helped push him into the presidency, and that those voters and the leaders of those voters, progressive lawmakers, are going to have high expectations that their voices be heard. And that's understandable.
Yeah. I mean, and there, look, it is true that Joe Biden could not have won the presidency without progressive Democrats who see themselves in the AOCs and the Ilhan Omars of the world.
Yep.
And I know that Jim Clyburn also knows that is true too. But there has to be a negotiation here. I think what those young voters said in this election by coming out for someone who is their polar opposite in a lot of ways, an older, white standard bearer of the old guard, is that they are willing to engage in the political process because it's affected their lives. And so I think on some level there's maybe a silver lining here, which is that if young people came out for Joe Biden, it's because they believe that they know that there is going to have to be some kind of compromise. It's not because Joe Biden said to them, I'm going to be, the far left leader that you've always wanted. I'm going to be contrary to what the president said, he is not going to be a Bernie Sanders light. That is just not who Joe Biden has been for his political life.
And let me just also say, first of all, the progressives did a ton to win this presidency, as you're saying, for Joe Biden.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, was door knocking.
Yep.
Her seat was safe. She was door knocking to get
after
people
a tough primary, I should say.
After a tough primary, her seat was safe. She was door knocking to get people to vote in Minnesota, to get progressives, to get her people to the polls to vote for Joe Biden, so that Minnesota would not be in play as people thought it would be several months ago. AOC is one of the stars of the Democratic Party, period. And when I had her on State of the Union before the election, she was more disciplined and able than almost any politician I'd interviewed in the previous few months.
Important interview.
In terms of her acknowledgement of where she disagreed with Joe Biden on issues like the Green New Deal, et cetera, and also the fact that Joe Biden was, in her view, the absolute only choice.
Yeah.
So I don't want to.
She said she wanted the privilege of having to worry about.
Yes, exactly.
To lobby him. Is what she
the privilege to lobby him.
So nobody should. Nobody should. Oh, look at this huge turnout in Washington D.C. outside the White House. Just people celebrating Joe Biden's victory. A lot of relieved people, a lot of happy people. A lot of anti-Trump people, a lot of pro-Biden people. Biden-Harris count the votes, you see.
And luckily, a lot of masks.
And a lot of masks. We're seeing a lot of masks, which is good, although the crowds, according to public health officials, not so good. But
correct.
The masks are good. In any case, what I was going to say is nobody should treat the progressives as if they're a pain, because they are a vital part of the Democratic coalition, period.
Correct.
But that said, there is a reckoning going on, because some of the things that were said, especially when it comes to defunding the police, there are more moderate Democrats that think that it made their coalition, their majority, smaller. Mm-hmm. And look, this is Minneapolis. They are social distancing while celebrating in Minneapolis, Minnesota. So that's what's going to happen. There's going to be some fighting about this stuff in the Democratic caucus, we heard some warning shots from Congressman Clyburn just then.
And just on what you were talking about Ilhan Omar, even though she didn't have a real race, that she was knocking on doors. Pramila Jayapal, the co-chair of the Progressive Caucus. She represents Washington. She didn't have a real race, and yet she is part of an organization. She has an organization where they go out and they train people to knock on doors in battleground states all over. That is a very, very vital part of the progressive movement that we were just talking about, that allowed this moment to happen, that fueled this moment.
So Senator Mitt Romney, who ran for president and lost to Barack Obama and Joe Biden in 2012, just tweeted, Ann and I extend our congratulations to President-elect Joe Biden and Vice President-elect Kamala Harris. We know both of them as people of goodwill and admirable character We pray that God may bless them in the days and years ahead. Let's bring in Susan Rice, who was the National Security Advisor didn't mean to surprise you there, Dr. Rice. First of all, get your reaction. You worked with Joe Biden in the Obama-Biden administration. You have been campaigning for him, endorsing him, doing everything you could to get him elected. Your reaction to this moment?
I'm joyous. I'm grateful to the American people. I'm thanking God, and I'm grateful to Joe Biden and Kamala Harris for being who they are. They are exactly what our country needs now. We need competence. We need decency. We need honesty. And we need to come together. And that's what they represent. I know this is a painful moment for many who wish for a different outcome. I'm living in a household with some of them. But at this moment, I believe that we have an extraordinary opportunity to move this country forward, to reclaim our leadership in the world, and to address so many of the fundamental challenges we face, from COVID to the economy, to education, to healthcare, to racial justice, and climate change. And this is the moment we have to do so, and we have to heal in the process.
I want to ask you about your son is a somewhat notable conservative figure in the country, and I want to ask you about his disappointment in a second. But I do also want to first ask you, if you don't mind, as a black woman, we now have a black woman vice president-elect. It has never happened in the history of this country, and I'm just wondering if you could. I know you prefer to talk policy and you prefer to talk politics, but and national security. But I'm just wondering if you'll indulge me and our viewers, as a black woman, what does this moment mean to you?
It's amazing. It's amazing. It brings tears to my eyes and joy to my heart. And my, almost 18-year-old daughter feels thrilled. I know there are young girls, and I hope young boys all over this country who see themselves in her and the opportunity for them to be who they want to be. I could not be more proud of Kamala Harris and all that she represents for all of us. This is it's a historic, groundbreaking moment.
It's obviously a very emotional moment for tens of millions of Americans, especially those who before today had never seen someone like them, a woman of color, represented in a president or vice president. And we should acknowledge that this is a moment of great joy and celebration. As for the
celebration.
Yeah, in terms of the experiment of America and the promise of America, what can happen here. Joe Biden is expected to give his first speech this evening as president-elect. You're someone in a household where I know you a little bit, and I know your family a little bit, and there are Trump supporters in your family and Biden supporters in your family. What does Joe Biden need to say to start unifying the country?
Well, I must say, not just for my son, but others in my family and universe who have different political views. I'm really proud of my son today. He's an American first, like I am. He believes in this country, and he also wants to see us move forward in unity, as disappointed as he may be. And we are family first and always will be. And this is a moment where we all need to look to the future and heal. And I believe that's what he believes as well. So we're together today. We're one household and we're one country. And we got to remember that just as in a family, in a country, we have so much more in common than that which divides us. And we've got to find that fundamental truth together as to who we are and what we can be. We can't survive divided. We can only be strong and safe and prosperous if we come together. And this is a moment where, on a very personal level and on a national level, even on a global level, we have to recognize and embrace that reality.
space for celebration. There is some risk to it because President Trump has not conceded, and obviously we want to give him time to process the information coming his way, fast and furious. But he's also out there claiming once again that election, he's making all sorts of false allegations about massive voter fraud. There's no evidence of that anywhere. How should how should President-elect Joe Biden deal with this? And do you have concerns about whether or not there will be a peaceful transition of power?
I think it's hard not to have some degree of concern, but I believe that this country is strong and resilient and that our institutions have shown up for this moment. Jake, if you'd asked me a week ago, 2 weeks ago, would our state and local officials, would our courts, would our people continue to have patience and faith in our process? How confident of that was I? I was confident, but I wasn't super confident. And today we can look at all of those and say, my goodness. And I have to say the media too. The media played this responsibly. And so all of our institutions have held. Now, Donald Trump has a choice to make. He can stand up and be part of our democracy, our historic tradition. He can be a responsible leader to hand off power. I know there are many reasons to doubt that, and I can't say I'm particularly optimistic, but the best thing he could do for himself, for his party, and for our country is to act like a president of the United States now at this late stage. So I hope he will. But if he doesn't, quite frankly, the nation, the institutions, the world, we're moving on. There will be a transition. Joe Biden will be the next president of the United States come January 20th. And he and Kamala Harris will be prepared to lead a team to govern this country again with competence and integrity. So it is going to be okay. It may be, a rough next couple of months if Donald Trump chooses to make it that way. That would be unfortunate for his legacy. It'd be unfortunate for the country. But we will get through this. And when we come out the other end, it will be a better day, and a day when finally government is turned to serve the American people and our many, many needs rather than anybody's personal interests.
Dr. Rice, you were on the short list. Joe Biden was considering asking you to serve as his vice president. Obviously, I'm sure you would be honored to play any role in the Biden-Harris administration. People have talked about you as a potential Secretary of State. Have you had any discussions with anyone on the transition team about a possible role in the administration? Would you be open to it?
Jake, I'm not going to get into that. This is not about me. This is about the United States of America. It's a day for celebration. This is a day to lift up Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. I will, as I've always said, I will serve in whatever capacity or not that Joe Biden thinks is best. But that's not the point. The point is today we're turning the page. We're opening a new chapter. I can't tell you how many messages I've gotten from people around the world, literally from Nigeria to London to Nairobi to Ottawa, just joy. And their message is, my God, thank God, America is back. You are back to being able to be the shining city on a hill that we can look to. And literally that's the message I've been getting. So let's celebrate that. And then let's figure out in the days to come, it will be Joe Biden's decision how he wants to constitute his team. And I'm happy to serve my country and to serve him in any way I can.
All right, Dr. Rice, thanks so much for taking the time to talk to us today. We really appreciate it. Best to every member of your family on this day. Really.
Thank you, Jake. Good to talk to you.
Fascinating, and it's her son Jake is a noted conservative on the campus of Stanford. Was in the news quite a bit for that, and it was. I liked hearing about the family disagreements. My family is Trump supporters and Biden supporters, and this is not an easy day for the Jakes of the world. Speaking of Dr. Rice's son, Jake, and
the other Jake.
It's. I mean, there are, as we've discussed, there are close to 70 million Americans who wanted a different outcome.
A lot of families are in that position, and I do think that for those who are open to being reached out to, they will have that outreach. I think that Joe Biden has made it very clear that he plans to try at least to bring everyone in. I think back to when President Trump was elected, and he said that he would do that, and then he didn't.
No, he never did.
He never did. So it's more than words. It's going to be actions. We'll see what comes, but I do think that there is more of a history for Joe Biden in his actual life of doing that. I also thought it was notable, as Susan Rice said, that the world is watching. You know, I have friends in London, in Beijing, who are literally glued to their televisions watching to see what is happening here in the United States, because the United States is obviously supposed to be the leader of the free world. And there have been a lot of questions about whether that is still true, and what American leadership means for the rest of the world, and what it might mean for the rest of the world under a Joe Biden presidency or another 4 years of Donald Trump. And I think that you're going to see in more than just Boris Johnson speaking up and basically saying, we think this is a done deal. You're going to see a lot more of that, I suspect, from other world leaders who have to decide which tack they're going to take. Yeah. In some ways, it might actually be messier for them to engage in this idea that the election has been undecided when all evidence to the contrary says that it in fact.
Yeah, the world is watching. She also said the world is moving on, which was a very telling moment, especially given the fact that the president's ally across the pond, Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister of the UK, was one of the first to publicly congratulate Joe Biden before the president conceded. Meanwhile, let's look at what the next First Lady just tweeted out. She tweeted a photo of her and the president-elect holding a sign saying "Doctor" and it was Vice President Biden live here, and she's covering up the vice there, saying he will be a president for all of our families. I mean, that's a message with not a lot of words, but a lot of impact and import.
And America's going to get really familiar with Philadelphia accents if you weren't sick of mine enough. Wait till you hear the soon-to-be First Lady of the United States and her Willow Grove inflect. It's going to be interesting. She's a really kind woman, and I got to interview her. You've interviewed her. She has made military families her cause, and that will continue to be her cause. She did that when she was the Second Lady of the United States. She said that she will do that as the First Lady of the United States as well, working with military families, having been a military family because of her son, Beau, and other members of her family.
And there's something else that's going to be really fascinating about Jill Biden. When she was Second Lady, you both remember, she's a teacher, and she continued to teach, a professor. She continued to do so while she was Second Lady. She said, I think when it was my interview with her, that she would do that when she's First Lady, too. She would continue to work. And
Dr. B.
Don't think that has happened before. Somebody can correct me if I'm wrong. Obviously, first ladies have a lot to do in their official role, but to work outside that home is not something we've seen before, I believe.
Yeah, and it was a statement when she did it as Second Lady. Yeah. It'll be a huge statement if she follows through and does it again. And but there are some ways that you can kind of dovetail both roles, right? And I believe that when she was Second Lady, the community college pathway was a big part of the kind of Obama-Biden economic message. And I suspect you'll see a lot of that again, especially as they try to get their hands around not just the coronavirus, but also the economic situation in this country going forward.
Dr. Biden's aide just texted me, it has not happened before. There has never been a First Lady who has kept a job like she intends to do, working in the classroom like she did when she was Second Lady. Go ahead.
I do wonder, as we talk about and try to contemplate how President Trump, not that it matters, but how President Trump is going to eventually turn over the reins of power. And again, he can concede, he cannot concede, he can behave like a mature adult, he can choose another way. There is also normally, and there was for the Obamas and the Trumps and the Bidens and the Pences, a handover movement. And I wonder if even if President Trump doesn't find it within himself to do that, which would, I think, by the way, just further sully his legacy, but that's up to him. I wonder if Melania will choose a different path. I kind of think she would.
Me too.
I kind of think that First Lady Melania Trump would take the time to meet with incoming First Lady Dr. Jill Biden. I have a much easier time picturing that in my head than picturing it happening with her husband.
I remember her talking publicly about how humbled she was by Michelle Obama doing that for her when they won the White House. So I would imagine that she would do the same for her successor.
Or at least that she would want to.
Or that she would want to. I mean,
I'm not
listen,
sure.
She,
you know,
that her husband will let her?
She does her own thing.
I think there's a question about whether that would happen.
You think so?
Logistically, from a logistical
Oh,
perspective.
logistically. I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of logistics, so never mind the fact that we don't believe that Joe Biden has gotten a phone call, which is tradition from somebody who has been defeated. One of the other traditions that we all know about on Inauguration Day, the departing president leaves a note for the incoming president in the Resolute desk.
Oh, boy.
Think that's going to happen?
It might be, but if I were Joe Biden, if I were President-elect Biden, I wouldn't read it. I wouldn't open the envelope. I mean, I think it would be a lot. I mean, he's still. First of all, he hasn't said anything yet. The last communication we have from the president is from about 3 hours ago, an all-caps message that says, "I won this election by a lot," which is not true. He didn't win this election, and he didn't win it by a lot. And also just, I mean, again, we've come to, this has become normalized, but that's just nuts. That's a crazy thing for somebody to say.
Yeah. And it's, honestly, I mean, at this point, it's un-American. When this is done, it's done. If you didn't get enough votes, it's over. And you're supposed to gracefully exit the stage.
No, grace is not a big word in his vocabulary.
He's not going to do it. But, I mean, it's going to be, as I said earlier, a transition unlike any other. I have some questions about what January 20th, 2021 is going to look like and whether he will participate in that transition of power. That is, I remember Barack Obama saying, and even George Bush talking about what that is like to be with the person you're replacing on that day. And the fact that we do that is a quintessentially American thing. It is the reason that we are the greatest democracy in the world. And I think the American people ought to know whether President Trump is willing to do that. Yes, it is symbolic, but he would really be, I think, tearing down something that does help the country move forward.
But,
if he were to bat it aside and say, I don't think this game was fair, I'm just going to walk off the field.
Well,
I think I won.
I think the American people should prepare themselves for the latter.
Yeah.
And set their expectations pretty low when it comes to how President Trump is going to deal with. I'm not saying you're suggesting otherwise, but I just think it's pretty clear, based on everything we've seen from President Trump, outgoing President Trump, throughout his career, but especially during his presidency, that he is not willing to put the concerns of the nation ahead of his own ego and his own concerns, and he is not going to rise to this moment. Now, should he prove me wrong? Wonderful. It'd be great for the country. It'd be great for his supporters. It'd be great for his legacy. Let's talk about what we expect to see in January, because we are in the middle of a pandemic. Joe Biden was not a President-elect Biden. I need to get used to that. President-elect Biden was not able to campaign and hold rallies in a normal way because we're in a pandemic. It's worse now in terms of the spread of the virus than it has been at any point throughout this pandemic. We just had the worst day ever, 125,000 Americans infected. It was the third day in a row of more than 100,000 infected. The virus is spreading. Joe Biden will not be able to have a normal inauguration or a normal inaugural ball or any of that.
No, and we, as you were talking, we just showed some of the cheering and the elation that is spilling onto the streets, largely masked elation, but it is still happening. And that kind of gathering is what Joe Biden tried to avoid for almost his entire campaign. He had drive-ins instead of rallies. And so I'm guessing that as happy as he is, that people are happy that he's going to be the next president, that's not something that he's thrilled about and not something he's going to want to see on his inauguration day. Thank you.
Something that public health officials throughout the country, Democrats and Republicans, are happy about in terms of President-elect Biden's new administration is that he's going to attempt to tackle the coronavirus pandemic in a way that President Trump has not attempted. Let's go back to Jeff Zeleny in Wilmington, Delaware, for more news on that front. And Jeff, this is obviously priority list number one for President-elect Biden.
And Jake, it absolutely is. And amid the celebration we see around the country and indeed here in Wilmington, we are being told now one of the first official acts after the President-elect Biden delivers his speech here tonight will be the naming of a coronavirus task force. We're told that is going to take place on Monday. We're told it's going to be a 12-member task force that is going to be announced to lay out a plan and really get this back on track. I'm told that it's going to be sort of led by three co-chairs, including a former Surgeon General from the Obama administration era, Dr. Vivek Murthy, as well as a former FDA commissioner, David Kessler, and a former and a current doctor at Yale University, Marcella Nunez-Smith. So those three co-chairs of this 12-member coronavirus task force to be announced on Monday, and that is going to be the beginning of what is going to be a series of very public, I'm told, speeches and announcements, and really trying to reconvey to the American people the seriousness of this crisis. We are going to expect briefings from them, perhaps daily televised briefings, and really try and seize that mantle. Now, Jake, the question here is, of course, the Trump administration is still in office. Dr. Anthony Fauci is still a government employee, so unclear how they can sort of meld this together. But at least up until now, I'm told that the Trump administration behind the scenes, in terms of the branches of government, has been participating with the Biden transition project. So we'll see if that goes forward here. But that certainly underscores the importance of where Joe Biden is placing his priority by making this COVID-19 task force announcement on Monday his first choice. And Jake, one other bit of news. I am told that at this hour, a little more than 2 hours after the president-elect was projected, that he has still not heard from the White House or the president, who, of course, as we know, is out golfing, but certainly has his telephone with him. So at least as of this hour, he has not heard from him. He has, of course, had phone calls with Speaker Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer, who I'm told held up his phone from a Brooklyn street so Joe Biden could hear all that cheering and elation, at least in Brooklyn. Jake.
All right, Jeff Zeleny in Wilmington, Delaware. Thank you so much for that report. Anderson?
Jake, thanks very much.